So, hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. My name is Isaac Hobson, and I am the current chair of the Virginia Library Association Professional Associates Forum. Today is our first virtual session for our Summer of Mental Health information sessions, and we couldn't be more excited to have everyone here. Our speaker today is Hayley Billingsley. Hayley is a research dietitian as well as a graduate assistant at Virginia Commonwealth University. She has her master's in health and movement sciences and her BS in human nutrition, foods, and exercise. Hayley is also pursuing her Ph.D. in rehabilitation and movement science. She has a 45-minute talk planned with about 15 minutes at the end for Q&As that will cover healthy eating habits, healthy eating at home, and how nutrition positively impacts mental health. I'll ask that everyone keeps themselves muted while Hayley gives us her presentation. Feel free to drop questions into the chat box. I will be moderating the chat as well as taking down any questions for our Q&A afterwards. We will try to answer as many questions as we can in the allotted 15 minutes. The session is being recorded, so if you need to leave early or if you want to watch it again, we will send out a link once the recording processes. Enough for me though. I would like to officially pass the mic over to Hayley so that she can begin her information session. So Hayley, the floor is all yours.
Great, thank you so much for that kind introduction, Isaac. As he was saying, my name is Hayley Billingsley, and I am a full-time research dietitian and exercise physiologist, as well as Ph.D. student at Virginia Commonwealth University. I've been practicing nutrition for 5 or 6 years now and really love it. Definitely my passion, so I'm excited to talk to you about my perspective on how healthy eating is linked to mental health, and then some tips, tricks that I use with my clients and patients to kind of shift them to a healthier eating pattern. So to kick this off, you should know right off the bat that most registered dietitians don't see things like your social media influencers. Our goal for you is a very healthy, individualized diet. And that doesn't look perfect. It's not quote unquote clean eating. It's a plan that works for you that supports your health in the best way that we can. We recognize the same thing is not going to work for everybody. That's why we practice personalized medicine. Our goal for you is just to have a good relationship with food and to overall keep up with a healthy lifestyle. So to begin, usually something I want to just lay out is what I consider the basics of a healthy dietary pattern. So what is a healthy dietary pattern? This is a lovely image from the recently released US Dietary Guidelines, which were released in January of this year. If you weren't aware, we do actually have national nutrition guidelines. Experts from all over the country at different universities and hospitals come together to collaborate on what they feel like the research supports. So this hasn't really changed a whole lot, or at least the basics of it haven't in the last 20 years or so. We want you to have fruits, vegetables, grains, protein, and dairy/dairy substitutes. And then to limit certain foods. And by that, I mean things that are rich in added sugars, saturated fat, and sodium, commonly known as salt. So some of the kind of easy and straightforward recommendations we put out regarding these food groups is to have a variety of vegetables in your diet, to really focus on whole fruits rather than fruit juice, to try to choose whole grains when you can. And by that, I mean things like whole wheat, brown rice, quinoa, farro, some of our popular whole grain options. And then to vary your protein routine. And if you are not somebody who enjoys meat, that's okay. There's lots of really beneficial vegetarian protein options. And then the last category being dairy. If you are not somebody who can tolerate dairy or chooses not to drink dairy, I would definitely recommend soy substitutes for dairy products. So we recommend really that you get 80 to 85% of your calories on a daily basis from these food groups. And then the remaining 15% of calories are what we call discretionary calories, meaning you can use them on these things that we say to typically avoid. Think your added sugars and your saturated fat. So if you can't give up the sugar and half in your coffee in the morning, that's okay. That can fit into that 15% of discretionary calories. So what does this look like for your average adult? Right off the bat, I do want to say that everybody's caloric needs are different. What I need in terms of calories in the day is not what you need. It's not what your Uncle Jim needs. It's not what your friend Tammy needs. Everybody has individualized calorie needs to support all of the different things that make them unique. And a registered dietitian can help you figure out an appropriate calorie goal for you. But for a 2,000 calorie a day diet, which is kind of what we present as the norm because it's kind of like a median value, or kind of in the middle of what most people need, that looks like 2 cups of fruit. And I think it's kind of covered up my bar at the top. Yeah, 2 cups of fruit, 2.5 cups of vegetables, 6 ounces of grains, 5.5 ounces of protein foods, and 3 cups of dairy. And right away, we start to kind of come into problems with this because there's a lot of foods that fit into this category that you're not necessarily going to just recognize by amounts. So what do I mean by 1 cup of fruit? 1 cup of fruit is kind of like a medium apple, like an apple you can fit in the palm of your hand, or a half a cup, or a cup of fruit juice, or a half a cup of dried fruit. Now, like I was saying earlier, we kind of prefer that people prioritize the whole fruits because dried fruit and fruit juice don't have quite the same benefits as raw or frozen fruit. And the same goes for canned or cooked fruit. When we process fruit in these different ways, we're kind of losing some of the nutrient value that's found in fresh or frozen fruit. Moving down to our vegetable category, I think a common misconception is that like 1 cup of lettuce at dinner kind of counts for your vegetables in the day because leafy greens are so fluffy. 2 cups of fluffy leafy greens that take up a lot of air space really count as 1 serving of vegetables. And again, same thing with fruits as vegetables and vegetables as fruits. You know, raw or frozen is going to be your best way to go. When we start processing vegetables, we do lose some nutrient value. It doesn't mean that cooked or processed fruits or vegetables have no place in your diet. It just means you're probably not benefiting from them quite as much as you would a raw option. Moving down to our grains group, what does an ounce of grain look like? That's a tricky one. Nobody's really, or most people are not weighing their food on a daily basis. So 1 ounce of grains is like a slice of bread, half a cup of pasta or rice, or something of that nature. Quinoa, farro, bulgur, some of the more obscure whole grains. 5.5 ounces of protein. I guess the traditional way we look at protein is pretty much like the palm of your hand is kind of 3 ounces. And where this gets tricky is everybody's palm is kind of a different size. So one way to look at it is kind of your pre-cooked weight of the meat. It's going to lose some water weight when you cook it. But if you have a 5-ounce steak, it's probably going to lose 1-2 ounces of water when you cook it, and then you've kind of got a serving of meat. And of course, meat is not the only protein we find in this group. We also have things like peanut butter, counts as a protein food. Same thing for almond butter. And then beans, peas, other vegetarian proteins, if you like tofu or tempeh, half a cup of those kind of cubed up is also going to count as 1 ounce of protein. And last category, dairy or dairy substitutes, a cup of yogurt, a cup of milk or soy milk, soy yogurt, or 1 ounce of cheese, kind of like one of those 1 by 1 inch squares of cheese would count as a serving of dairy. All right, so I'm done boring you to death with serving sizes, but it is a maybe unsexy but very important thing that we do need to remember, especially if we have certain goals that we want to achieve with our weight or health. Serving sizes do matter, and different tools like measuring cups and scales can be very helpful If you think you might be going over on certain foods and want to reduce or kind of get a good idea of what different serving sizes might look like. One of the biggest things that I like to emphasize is variety. I definitely have had friends and clients that prefer to eat the same thing every single day for ease of planning. And while I definitely understand that, we have so many foods in this world for a reason, especially for fruits and vegetables. We definitely get different nutrients from different colors of fruits and vegetables. The I guess, red tint or orange tint in a fruit or vegetable is going to indicate different nutrients than the dark green fruits and vegetables. And protein, again, I would emphasize, don't box yourself into meat. There are a lot of options out there to try in terms of different protein foods. And this can count for your protein throughout the day. For dairy, we still do kind of emphasize low fat and non-fat dairy. And this is because the saturated fat, you guys might remember me kind of emphasizing that we want to limit to some degree. Saturated fat is associated with different disease states, such as developing heart disease or cardiovascular disease down the road. So limiting sources of saturated fat, such as high-fat dairy, high-fat meat products. Basically, saturated fat is a fat that comes from meat and meat and animal products, and that's something we do want to limit in our overall diet. Grains, like I was saying earlier, definitely a good goal to make half of your grains whole grains, and that's because when we change things from, say, whole wheat bread to white bread, or from brown rice to white rice, we're kind of stripping a lot of nutrients away from the grain. And last but not least, one of my favorite categories, because this is what a lot of my research kind of regards, are healthy fats. So this is going to be things like nuts and seeds, extra virgin olive oil, canola oil, fatty fish, fatty cold water fish like salmon, tuna, etc., and avocados. Again, we do have some things we want to limit. Sodium or salt. We're going to want to limit our sodium to 2,300 milligrams a day. This can be quite tricky to achieve, especially in the American food culture where we kind of add salt to everything to give it flavor. If you haven't looked at this in the past, I would recommend that you kind of start keeping an eye on sodium. Common high sodium choices I see people making are often like processed or prepackaged foods to keep them shelf stable and to keep them tasting good. Often a lot of salt is added. Also, takeout food, restaurant food, lots of salt is added, more than necessary to kind of give it that nice taste and kind of make other flavors pop. And why do we limit sodium? It is associated with high blood pressure down the road. And high blood pressure can kind of lead to a variety of outcomes like cardiovascular disease or heart disease that we would like to avoid. Saturated fat, again, this is the fat that comes from animal products. One of the best ways to limit saturated fat is just to limit your use of animal products, or if you don't want to do that, choose low fat or lean options. I'm talking like 1% milk, I'm talking like getting chicken breast with skin removed. I am talking about getting ground beef that is like 90% fat-free or over, etc. And avoiding things like bacon, sausage, etc. Processed meats that are rich in saturated fat and sodium, like our bacon, sausage, charcuterie meat, etc., is going to really kind of give us the double whammo of having high sodium and high saturated fat at the same time. Sugar, and especially added sugar here, and added sugar comes in a variety of forms. It's not just your white table sugar. It's some of the alternative sweeteners that have become more popular in recent years. Maple syrup and honey might have a few antioxidants in them, but they're really not benefiting your health. It's fine to have a little of these throughout the day. Remember, we kind of said maybe like 85 to 80% of your calories should come from your healthy food groups. And the rest can be discretionary calories from things like saturated fat and sugar, as well as alcohol. Alcohol, we like to tell people 1 drink a day for women, 2 drinks a day for men is kind of the safe limit. Over this, we see kind of associations with things like breast cancer in women, colorectal cancer, etc. And one drink a day for women can look like a lot of different things. So standard drink size is like a 5% alcohol, 12-ounce beer. So kind of like one light beer is a standard drink. And going over that with some of our delicious craft beer options is kind of where people get in trouble. Same thing with wine. A standard wine pour, I believe, is 12% alcohol in like 5 ounces, which is a little bit of a smaller glass than most people might think. And then cholesterol has been a topic that's been much debated in recent years. It has been removed from our dietary guidelines. However, when we limit saturated fat, we limit cholesterol innately. So while we no longer have a limit for it in our dietary guidelines, by limiting the fat you get from animal sources, you're going to limit cholesterol. So kind of moving into the topic you guys are actually here to hear about today, and that's the link between diet and mental health. I'm gonna pause and get a drink of water. So I want to start out acknowledging that I am not in any way, shape, or form a mental health professional. You know, if you have concerns or worries, I would definitely recommend you consult somebody, whether that's your primary care physician who can get you in touch with a professional counselor. I definitely am not qualified to give any mental health advice whatsoever as a registered dietitian. And I very much believe that lifestyle therapies such as a healthy diet are adjunct. We want you to have them, but they're really just going to provide another therapy on top of appropriate healthcare. You know, shifting to a more healthy dietary pattern, we definitely cannot say at this time that that's going to cure your anxiety or depression. These issues are much more complex than simply a one option approach such as nutrition. So how are diet and mental health linked? In recent years, there's definitely been an increase in the percentage of people worldwide diagnosed with a mental health condition. And that's definitely a complex interaction. Number one, we probably have more mental health care available than any other time in history. So naturally, people are going to be diagnosed with these things more often because we finally have the knowledge and resources, at least in some areas, to help people deal with their mental health. So naturally, there's going to be an increase in diagnosis. However, we've also really, in recent years, you know, this does not look like any other time in history. We've really moved to a lifestyle that our ancestors could probably not have even imagined outside of a sci-fi novel. So with that, it's definitely going to put a big, I guess, weight or stress on our brains to try to transition in a way very different from that humans were developed to live, I guess most simply. In terms of food, which is my area of expertise, we've really kind of hit this very historically unique area where never before in history have humans had access to so much calorie-rich and nutrient-poor diets. And by that, I mean, we have a lot of calories and not a lot of the things that make food beneficial to go along with them. I'm talking vitamins, minerals, dietary fiber, all of the lovely things we have here on the left. You know, we've got a lot of calories here, but we don't have a lot of the nutrients that we need to support our brain health. So we have kind of shifted into this pro-inflammatory dietary pattern, and I am more of a body specialist myself. And we recognize that a pro-inflammatory, quote unquote, westernized dietary pattern, which is rich in calories from saturated fat, sugar that we add, refined grains, and by that I mean our white bread, white rice, cookies, cakes, desserts, and red meat is something that is associated with increases in inflammation that we can actually measure in the body through things like blood tests. And we've definitely very much reduced the vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and legumes that we eat. So while this has an inflammatory effect on the body, it also has an inflammatory effect on the brain. And I can't simply limit this to problems with diet. We've changed a lot of things about the way we live. We are more sedentary than ever before, especially during this international pandemic. We're not doing a lot of moving around. And then there's probably a higher, or at least higher recognized use of alcohol, tobacco, and other recreational drugs. We definitely have more access to these things than we ever have in history. So it's kind of presenting a unique burden for our brain to bear. So why would this affect our brain? Our brain uses a huge amount of energy every day. It uses about 20% of the calories that you use simply go to making sure your brain can process all of the information that's thrown on it all day long. And of course, brains are not just using energy. They require a lot of things that we take in through food. Think the building blocks of proteins, which are called amino acids, fats, which are broken down into something we call fatty acids, all of the different vitamins from vitamin K to vitamin A to vitamin B, and the very diverse range of minerals. So all of these are also going into supporting and helping build the structure we have in terms of our brain. So when we strip these things away from the diet, we're no longer supporting those components that our brain needs to function correctly. And there's been a lot of observational research in the last 30 years in terms of a link between different mental health conditions in healthy dietary patterns in all of the different age ranges. They've seen that diet in maternity can have a huge effect in children's early childhood mental health. We've seen this in children and adolescents. We've also seen this obviously in adults, where dietary pattern has a huge link with mental health and mental health conditions. What do I mean by observational research? It is simply the easiest type of research to do on something like mental health and diet. It's basically observing what people eat, collecting data on what people eat, and linking it to different outcomes. So how many people who eat a certain food product develop depression? So that's kind of what I mean by observational research. We're kind of watching the environment and linking these things up. We're not changing the person's dietary habits. But with this, I'll say, in recent years, there have been an increasing number of nutrition studies that have looked at actually changing people's diets and seeing how mental health outcomes, such as different depression scores, change in relation to changing the diet. And I've mentioned depression several times just because that seems to be the most common, I guess, mental health condition that's studied in relation to nutrition. But that mental health and nutrition definitely does not stop at depression. Anxiety, bipolar disorder, cognitive diseases of aging such as Alzheimer's and dementia, ADHD, and etc. Like you can go for days. Anything that's out there, somebody has tried to link it with lifestyle habits, including diet. One of the most important things I think to remember here is it's not all that simple. Yes, there does seem to be a very strong signal between different mental health conditions and diet, but these things go both ways. If you are dealing with depression and you're struggling to get out of bed in the morning, how much motivation do you really have to make yourself a healthy meal or to make healthy choices? It's not that simple. So are we simply seeing that depressed people have a harder time eating healthy, or are we seeing that healthy diets help prevent depression? It's a complex relationship, and that's why what we call randomized control trials, where we actually intervene and change somebody's diets, are very important to see if this is, just something that kind of goes both ways, or if diet can actually have an impact on changing our mental health. And along with kind of bidirectional relationship, I would mention confounding factors as well. Poor diet or suboptimal dietary choices don't exist in a vacuum. Somebody who does not have access to healthy foods probably does not have access to a whole lot of things. And studies will try to control for all these variables: education, socioeconomic status, but it's hard to control out all the things that might put up a barrier to eating a healthy diet and stress your mental health. So while I do believe a link very much exists, I would say it's definitely not that simple. Probably poor diet is not the only only thing that's challenging going on in people's lives. So, what foods have been linked in the literature to directly impacting mental health? Some common examples that pop up in a whole lot of studies include what we commonly refer to as omega-3 fatty acids. And these things are found in cold water fish, such as salmon and tuna, and a lot of other seafood in kind of varying amounts. Zinc, which is found in a lot of different foods. Commonly, meat and protein foods include zinc. B vitamins are found in almost all foods, and vitamin D, which you commonly see in milk and dairy products, is usually added into those products. Some mushrooms also naturally have some vitamin D. But I think the important thing to remember here is the more of a nutrient-dense diet you can eat, meaning the more fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, beans, the more you're going to be getting these vitamins and minerals throughout the day. These are certainly not the only dietary components that probably have an impact on mental health. These are just some of the most commonly studied to date. So this is my favorite question as a dietitian. Can I just take a vitamin and just pop a pill for the day? I've tried to talk my own partner many times out of just taking a multivitamin. And as much as I've tried, I haven't been able to prevent that. But what I will say is that taking these different nutrients in pill form, whether you're taking an omega-3 fatty acid capsule, whether you're taking a B vitamin supplement, maybe these things are able to affect your mental health, but the broad amount of research out there has usually shown no outcome with taking vitamin and mineral supplements in terms of health. Basically, there seems to be a different effect when these things are eaten in the context of a healthy diet rather than taken in a pill form. So what I generally say is if you are a healthy person without any diagnosed conditions whatsoever, please consider making some changes to shift your diet to a healthier pattern before you just say, all right, I'm just going to take a vitamin, because it doesn't really work the same way. Obviously, if you have been diagnosed with a different vitamin or mineral deficiency, I would definitely encourage you to do exactly as your doctor says and take the vitamin or mineral supplement. But if you're a person that's not dealing with anything like that, I would just encourage you to take a look at your diet and see what you might be able to shift to make your diet a little bit more health promoting. And something else I will add is the FDA barely regulates vitamin and mineral supplements in the United States. So what they do is typically post-marketing. So when the things are already out on the market, that's when they look for problems. So nobody's really verifying that B vitamin supplement you're taking actually has B vitamins in it at all. So more or less, if it's a supplement on the shelf, we really don't know what's in it. The FDA kind of only comes in when there's a problem. Nobody's looking to see if these supplements are really including what they say they're including. There are organizations out there that do independent verification on products. So if you are really somebody who feels strongly about taking a vitamin or mineral supplement, I would look into this independent verification, the different organizations that look at supplements in the United States, and basically check off if they include what they say they're including, because the regulation is quite poor. And if at least you're not getting what you're paying for, at the worst, you could be taking something harmful. So just be careful if you are very interested in taking a vitamin or mineral supplement. All right, so we have about 10 more minutes. we'll kind of start on this and see how far we get. So this is kind of some problem shooting that I do with patients, clients, etc., on kind of shifting to a healthier dietary pattern. Because it's not easy. We live in the United States where we're constantly in basically a food environment that doesn't support our health. So here are just some of the ways that you might be able to kind of combat this in your own life. I feel like the backbone of this is more or less planning. So planning ahead, making the list, grocery shopping on the least busy time you can get in the store so it's not really unpleasant. Yeah, trying to make a plan of what you're going to actually make with that food ahead of time. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to the store, come back, and halfway through the week, I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Why did I buy this? I'm not sure what I'm going to make. So having a plan of what you're going to make, a list of what you're going to buy, and a time where you can actually go into the store and it's not miserable is definitely key. And something we always tell people, don't shop hungry. You'll tend to make choices that are significantly less health promoting. Be realistic, especially during the week. I definitely do this to myself from time to time where I'm like, oh my gosh, there's no way I'm gonna make this dinner that takes an hour. I'm so tired, I've been at work all day. You know, there's nothing wrong with a good 30-minute meal. What's something you can kind of whip together really quick? Can you make anything in advance? Can you bake that chicken the night before? Can you make more chicken the night you are actually planning to grill so that you can put it in other dishes and you don't have to like heat up the whole grill again later in the week? How can you multitask? How can you basically make this a faster process? You know, the more you discourage yourself with recipes that take way too much time, the less likely I feel like people are able to keep up that habit throughout the week, and the more likely we all are to fall into the kind of takeout trap of, oh my gosh, it's 7 o'clock, I don't feel like cooking. What can we get that's really fast from takeout? And then I personally like to pair one more complicated thing with a simple option. So like last night, you know, turkey burgers are not overly complex, but they do take a little bit more time than a salad. So the turkey burger was the complex thing. And then the salad was an easy thing that I could kind of make while the turkey burgers were cooking. Prepping in advance, meal prepping. Some people, this works really well for them to kind of box out what they're going to eat throughout the week. Personally, I don't really do this to any large degree. I'm definitely a big proponent of making more food and then eating leftovers for a couple of days. But I feel like a lot of things in the fridge, you know, if you're going to try to make it on Sunday and then eat it on Friday, the quality of the food kind of does decline throughout the week. So I would kind of propose like modified meal prepping. Can you make a lot of extra food and have leftovers for a couple days, especially if it's something that keeps well in the fridge, like soup or proteins like a grilled chicken, something that you're not going to be disgusted by 2 days later. And then snacks to pick up and grab. Fruit, think an apple, banana, these things are super easy. Even like washing berries really quickly and putting them in a Tupperware, it's a really easy option that's going to stay probably okay in your purse for a while. And you can just grab it out later. And then nuts, I feel like they last forever at work. You don't have to worry about them going bad. It's always a nice thing to have on hand that has a lot of health benefits. I'm all for shortcuts. You know, don't make it the most complex way that you can. You know, take the frozen vegetables, take the canned beans. One of my favorite like shortcut meals is frozen stir fry. So literally using frozen brown rice from Trader Joe's, frozen vegetables from Trader Joe's, and frozen shrimp from Trader Joe's to make stir fry. And it takes less than 30 minutes, but I'm still getting a lot of benefit out of those options. Some things keep really well in the fridge or freezer, certainly not everything. But if you have a lot of extra vegetables, and you realize they're going to go bad, you know, chop them up, freeze them, and then use them for a quick soup later on. Fresh summer herbs, often when I buy herbs, they go bad really quickly because you might not be planning to use it in every recipe that you make that week. But there's a lot of good ways to just kind of freeze the herbs for later. That way you always have it on hand. And it's already chopped up, so you don't have to take it out of the fridge and chop it. I would always also recommend keeping a record, just kind of a list of what you like and what you didn't like. I don't know how many times I've heard, like, I just don't know what to make during the week. Start looking for recipes, write down what you make, and then you have something to pull out later and be like, oh yeah, I really did like that recipe. And that's what I guess I can make tonight. So you're not constantly having to try to remember what you've made. This is definitely very relevant to our mental health discussion. Reward and stress eating is something I hear people definitely complain about a lot. Like going to work all day, it's stressful. And when you go home, all you want is that big bowl of ice cream or large glass of wine. I definitely can't blame you. But if it's not in line with what you wanting to do with your health, starting to look at alternative ways to kind of reward yourself. And by that, I mean, like, can you watch a favorite show or movie? Can you call a friend on the phone? Is there another way to kind of de-stress rather than turning towards a food that might make you feel disappointed in yourself later if it's not in line with the health goals that you're working towards? And I've seen this a lot recently. Self-care does not necessarily equate with indulgence. So getting home and having that huge bowl of ice cream, that's not really self-care. It might feel like it in the moment, but is it really going to line up with what you've wanted to do with your health? But in the same line, I should say that food choices don't equal shame. This is one of the most common pitfalls that I see people fall into, especially women, being really ashamed of food choices. And, choosing a certain food does not make you a good or bad person. It's simply a food choice that you make in that moment. There's a reason why you did it. It is not an indicator of who you are. It's hard to be an adult. So, shaming yourself, I usually see people having this cause them to kind of quit their diet or quit their health goal. Like, oh, I've already ruined it. I always do this. Why don't I just kind of keep on with this track and keep doing this, because it never works anyways. I would much rather have you see it as kind of like just a little blip. We're all going to do that from time to time. It's one incident. Get back on the wagon. It's totally fine to make a choice that's not in line with your goals from time to time. And kind of refocus this question in your head. Healthy food is something you deserve because you deserve to have a healthy, long life. It's not something that you should eat because it'll make you skinny. You deserve these foods to support your overall health throughout your lifespan. You deserve to feel good. And I think we'll finish up with this one so you guys have a chance to ask any questions that might be nagging at you. Are you hungry? Are you bored? Are you stressed or thirsty? Are you snacking for one of these reasons? Are you actually hungry? If you kind of check in with yourself and say, okay, I'm not really that hungry. I'm just so bored. I've been in this meeting with my camera off in Zoom for, 2 hours now. Maybe keep some things around that are, calorie-free. So sugar-free gum, tea, coffee, seltzer water, water with fruit in it, some stuff that can kind of keep you occupied while you're sitting through that boarding meeting without adding, a lot of calories to your day. If you're free from work and just bored after work or school, what's something that you could do that will capture your interest without adding more snacks into your day? If you're stressed, and again, with stress eating, can you bring yourself comfort in any other way? Can you kind of check in with yourself? Identify what's bothering you and kind of do something else that might make you feel a little better. Can you go on a short walk? Can you call a friend or family member? Could you make a cup of tea? Could you turn on a favorite song? Could you do something else to kind of deal with the stress other than kind of turning to snacks? And when I refer to snacks, I'm really talking about, in the last couple of slides, things that are not benefiting your health when you're not hungry, like the chips, the pretzels, anything else that you can kind of like pick up mindlessly and start eating. If you're actually hungry, then I definitely encourage you to eat that snack. I would kind of look into what food group you might not have gotten in that day. You know, if you haven't had any dairy that day, maybe you want to try a Greek yogurt, or you want to try a plant-based yogurt that has some protein added to it. Maybe you want to get a fruit or vegetable to get some vitamins and minerals and protein or fiber in. Maybe you want to grab some nuts to also get those minerals, fiber, as well as some healthy fat in your day. Kind of think of what you haven't had yet and try to add that in. All right. And for time's sake, we'll go ahead and finish up there. I'm going to turn it over to Isaac for questions.
Thank you so much, Hayley. That was incredible. And I will say, I am so glad that we decided to do this after lunch today, because that would have been significantly harder to get through if I was hungry. So I really appreciate that. That was awesome. Okay, so if you're okay with it, I'm going to hit you with a couple of different questions from the chat. Feel free for people to add things as well. I'll try to catch any other questions, but we definitely have a handful already. So I'm going to go ahead and throw out the first one, which was that early on you had mentioned using like soy as an alternative, and we had a question on I guess some of the information on nut milks in place of soy or instead of soy. We didn't know if you had any information on that.
So that's a great question, one I get a lot. So with a lot of the nut milk alternatives, they actually don't offer many vitamins and minerals that are naturally present in soy or dairy products. There's a couple things that I'd like to see added to all milk and milk alternatives. Like vitamin D and vitamin A. Whatever you're drinking, definitely look for those two vitamins to be added to it. It's kind of just standard. If you're drinking something like soy milk, almond milk, coconut milk, also look for calcium to be added. So those are kind of the three big ones. There's not really any actual evidence that dairy negatively impacts your health in any way, and it does provide a number of nutrients naturally that a lot of these milk alternatives are just kind of water with a little bit of flavoring added to them. So I don't really recommend them. If you do have an allergy and that allergy prevents you from drinking both soy milk and cow's milk, that's totally fine. Maybe you also want to look for like an almond milk or a coconut milk that has like protein added to it, because that's another thing that you will not see in the milk alternatives. So I would say, if you're not wanting to drink cow's milk, reach for soy milk. With those things added, the calcium, vitamin D, and vitamin A, and then kind of look at the other options and make sure that they've tried to at least add some protein to them.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay, so the next one is we had some curiosity about like sugar alternatives, and somebody had mentioned using monk fruit for baking, as well as like stevia, and then some of the complications of like your body not reacting well to alternative sugars. And we just didn't know your thoughts on that, or if you had any tips or tricks.
Sure. So first, I would always recommend that whatever sugar alternative you're using is actually calorie-free. Why does that matter? Because most of the like sweeteners, if there's calories in it, it's probably going to be some kind of sugar. And a lot of the things like agave syrup, it's just sugar. Yeah, it's repackaged sugar. So first, make sure it's actually a calorie-free alternative. That's where you might be getting any health benefit whatsoever. And then I'm not opposed to it. If you feel like it's lowering your dietary sugar intake, I think there's much stronger evidence that added sugar negatively impacts our health. And there really hasn't been any good long-term evidence to say that sugar or sweetener alternatives actually negatively impact our health. I think the jury to some degree is still out on the newer ones, the monk fruit, the stevia. But know that there's really not a lot of evidence saying these things actually negatively impact our health. There's a few small studies from time to time that will like raise an issue, but then the next study will kind of disprove it. So don't go overboard, especially if you're worried about health impacts. But using those things from time to time should be totally fine.
Okay, so this one I think is there's the overarching question about almost distinguishing the healthy versus unhealthy versions of like the same food. And specifically the example was popcorn as a healthy snack, because we know that popcorn can be very healthy, but it could also, I guess, be not very healthy. And we just didn't know if there were any kind of clear signs to distinguish between some of the healthy and unhealthy versions of those same foods.
Wow, that's a really good question. I'm very impressed. So number one, I would pull out that nutrition facts label, grab both of those packages, put them side by side, and then you're going to look for a couple things. Everybody's calorie goal is different. So, you could consider that. I'm definitely not opposed to you looking at the calories on the popcorn. But then I would look for saturated fat. The one with the lower saturated fat is going to be the better option. If it's seasoned with olive oil instead of saturated fat, that's perfect. And by saturated fat, I mean butter. I don't think I mentioned that. So those ones that are like movie theater butter flavoring, try to avoid those. They probably don't have anything beneficial for your health added to them. So saturated fat's a big one on popcorn. And then, if it's not popcorn you're looking at, but something else, I would look at the added sugars. The option that's lower in added sugars is going to be the more beneficial option. That is something they've started adding to that nutrition facts label. And then the last category I would look at is sodium, especially for something like popcorn. The one that's higher in sodium is going to have a more negative impact on your health than the one that's lower in sodium. If you're really looking to be a purist about it, make the homemade popcorn and season it yourself. But if you're just kind of looking to get two kind of easy options, compare the two for especially saturated fat and sodium and pick the one that's lower in both of those options. And popcorn is a whole grain, so it's a great option for snacking.
Good, awesome. Thank you, Hayley. Okay, so then I had another question that I'm personally very curious about as well, so I'm glad somebody asked it. So we've heard that it is better to eat dinner earlier as opposed to not going to bed on a full stomach. Do you mind either elaborating or confirming about that?
Oh man, I love that question. My research very specifically focuses on time of eating.
Nice, even better.
It is
cool.
kind of in a more ill population than I hope that most of you are. So what I would say is right now we don't have very strong evidence suggesting that eating earlier is going to strongly be related to your health outcomes. What I will say is for some people, when they say, okay, I'm going to stop eating at 7, it can help them limit more unhealthy choices. And by that, I mean that most of us are more prone to eat dessert, drink alcohol, kind of snack mindlessly later at night. So I think the jury is still out on whether that time really truly is going to impact our health the same way for each and every person. I think that we are all more prone to making less healthy choices as the night goes on. So if you can kind of stop eating around dinner time, it's probably not a bad thing. But there's no specific time as of right now that we suggest people cut off their food consumption.
Okay, good to know. So then I guess, so we had kind of two questions that were things that you had talked about in the slides that we might have just needed a quick refresher on. One question was about how to check on our vitamins again. I don't know if that was something that you can go over just quickly, right quick, or if we can, refer to the recording of the video if that's easier.
For sure. So I would say right off the bat, do you have any chronic health conditions? Some certain chronic health conditions and medications to treat those health conditions can result in a vitamin deficiency. So that's something you might want to ask your primary care doctor. If you're somebody who's, as far as you know, free from any chronic health conditions, then true vitamin and mineral deficiency is very rare in the United States. We might not be getting an optimal amount of those nutrients, but true deficiency is pretty rare. So I would say if you're eating a healthy dietary pattern overall, not excluding anything, it's probably, there's not a very good chance you probably have a vitamin or mineral deficiency. But if you are dealing with a health condition, it is very sensible to ask whether anything you're dealing with might result in a vitamin deficiency. I think of a family member that has Crohn's disease, which is a gastrointestinal disorder. She is at a higher risk of vitamin and mineral deficiency, and her doctor can check the levels of those things in her blood. But for somebody like me who doesn't have a chronic underlying health condition, it's not something I'm worried about as long as I kind of eat an overall healthy diet.
Okay, so I have another one. What are your current recommendations for potassium? Seems like there have been a lot of kind of different numbers in the news lately, and I just didn't know if there was some consistency or something concrete about that you might know.
So I can throw out a number for you right away.
Nice. Okay.
That would be 4,700 milligrams of potassium a day. That is a very hard thing to achieve in the United States. I will say the more plant-based your diet is, the more it's rich in non-starchy vegetables. So starchy vegetables are things like corn and potatoes. Non-starchy are kind of like almost everything else. The more vegetables you're able to eat, the more fresh, unprocessed foods you're able to eat, the higher the potassium will be in your diet.
And then this is a follow-up to kind of the earlier question that we had about soy, which is that we had heard that soy might not be the best for the female reproductive system, and didn't know if you knew about any research on this topic or have heard anything about that.
Yeah, so it's another thing that I think has been very much used as a scare tactic. Different news agencies with splashy headlines that don't necessarily reflect the actual research or the strength of the research coming out. I will say there haven't really been any strong evidence linking soy to, like, say, reproductive cancers. Something that has very much been linked to cancers of the reproductive organ in women has been alcohol consumption. Alcohol consumption is very linked to breast cancer in women. So I would say overall the soy thing has definitely been used as a scare tactic. It possibly, the phytoestrogens could maybe alter some hormones if eaten at a very, very high level. But unless soy is the only thing you're eating every day, all day, I wouldn't worry too much about it. It has been a scare tactic that's been in the news in the past.
Okay, so I got maybe two more and then one final closing one if we've got the time for it. So
yeah, up until 3 o'clock. So whatever you guys want to ask, throw it at me.
Awesome. Thank you, Hayley. So may I ask, what about minerals as opposed to vitamins, and maybe your stance on that?
Oh, like taking a mineral supplement?
Sure, yes.
Okay, so same thing. I would say in a healthy diet that we're really trying to include a variety of healthy foods every day. Most people are not going to need a mineral supplement. It's pretty rare to have an actual clinical deficiency. So I would first stick to, I guess, eating a healthful diet. And then, if there's something you're really concerned about, and this just popped into my head, I know a lot of people have, been Facebooking about the like zinc and COVID-19. It is possible that people with higher levels of things like zinc and vitamin D in their blood have better outcomes in terms of COVID-19. I would say that research, especially since it's only been done in the last couple of years, is observational research. So again, you're observing a group of people and you're seeing what's going on with them. It doesn't necessarily mean the higher level of zinc is what's leading to the preferred outcome, which is, avoiding or getting less sick from COVID-19. So if there's anything you're concerned about in particular, I would definitely ask your primary care physician, maybe get a referral to a registered dietitian, because there are some vitamin and minerals, if taken in very large amounts, that can actually cause toxicity. So that's something I would really keep in mind. If you're taking massive amounts of vitamin and mineral supplements, and again, remember the supplements are not very well regulated, it could cause actually a problem with toxicity or having a toxic level of these things in your blood. So just be careful.
Okay. So then another one that I think was kind of a follow-up when we had the question about eating dinner earlier, somebody wanted to know if there were any foods or drinks that can kind of help you fall asleep or help you have better sleeping habits or something like that.
would say, sometimes when people are eating directly before bedtime, that can alter sleep, not in all people. I think the jury is more or less kind of out on that one. I mean, I know certain foods like the tryptophan, which is a part of a protein found in turkey, it's been long said to make you sleepy after Thanksgiving dinner. I would say the biggest thing for me is it's surprising how many people consume caffeine late in the day. So if you're looking for better sleep quality, try to cut off your caffeine consumption as early as possible. Honestly, that's probably the biggest dietary sleep barrier that I see in most people. As for things that can actually help you sleep better, maybe having things that don't, sometimes a large meal can kind of disrupt your sleep. You're trying to digest a lot of things directly before bed. If you have certain foods that irritate your stomach, irritate your digestive tract, that can also lower your sleep quality. But I would say there's no like magic bullets of things that can really help you sleep better. And often the supplements you see out there, it's kind of questionable, like, is it really helping your sleep quality or is it a placebo effect? Or basically like, I think it's helping, and then you really do sleep better.
Cool. Okay, so then I guess as a final question, in the spirit of the library professionals that most of us probably are, do you have any resources or tips for finding dietitians or nutritionists around us that might be a good resource for us to be able to look to after this?
Absolutely. And yeah, unfortunately, something I don't always add as a caveat is it's hard to access a registered dietitian in the United States. And that's because medical billing is, of course, behind where we would like it to be. It's not as well covered by insurance as I would like. So expect that, if you don't have a diagnosed health condition, this could be something you pay for out of pocket. And I'm very sorry for that. Talk to the insurance companies. But I would say the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics website is a great place to start, or the Greater Richmond Area Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And that is abbreviated GRAND. So if you Google Grand Nutrition Richmond, it should pull up the page and it should help direct you to some local dietitians. And I'm sure they have like an email box too, where you could get a referral.
Okay, well then that is it for today's session. We really appreciate everybody for coming out, and a massive special thank you to Hayley for making all of this possible. This was wonderful. I'm so grateful that you could come, and I know that we all took a lot out of this. And for everybody else, keep your eyes peeled for future sessions this summer. We've got stuff coming in July, August, and September. Until next time, have a great rest of your day. And thank you so much, Hayley. This was wonderful.
Thank you, Isaac. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, have a good week.